honored to be joined by one of the key people who've helped put this together and one of the leaders here, James Burke, President and Chairman of the Burke Foundation. Good to see you, James.
Great to see you, Steve.
For those who do not know what the Burke Foundation is, please share.
So my father, who was chairman and CEO of Johnson & Johnson from 1976 to 1989, right when he retired, he started the Burke Foundation, which was children and health, really, was the main focus. And it is only recently that we have sort of honed in on this childhood adversity issue as something that we think is a health crisis, frankly.
So tonight, it's interesting. There are a couple things happening that make this night significant. First of all, there's a $2 million fund that's being established. The first $2 million comes from your foundation and from the Nicholson Foundation. $2 million to do what?
Well, it's seed money. So we are going to try to
attract more money.
To attract more money from tonight at this event that we're having. There's going to be business leaders, there's going to be philanthropists, foundations. We're trying to create a coalition around healing and stopping the adverse childhood experiences and the trauma and the toxic stress that comes with that. Because there's proof that later down the road, there's negative outcomes from that we could solve for.
And excuse me for interrupting, Jim.
Sure.
The term ACE is adverse childhood experiences. There's a report that's coming out. We are taping, in fact, November. The report will come out very soon formally, and there'll be some highlights of the report tonight. What are we talking about when we talk about adverse childhood experiences?
So I became aware of this through Dr. Nadine Burke Harris, who's going to be our
We'll be talking to her
keynote
as
speaker.
well.
Yeah,
she wrote a compelling book on the subject.
The Deepest Well. She's just incredible. And basically, she's put together a test that is 10 questions that teases out, did you have adverse childhood experiences or traumatic events in your childhood? And if you have say 4 or more, that can lead to very negative health outcomes, including higher rates of cancer and heart disease and high blood pressure and all sorts of things. So again, for us, we're early childhood funders, and we think that if we can catch them early, we can solve for those things later in life as adults and get more positive outcomes.
You know, it's interesting. I told you before we got on the air that we're involved in an initiative that the Turrell Fund, one of the key organizers tonight, is helping to fund. It's called Right from the Start, NJ, 0 to 3, birth to 3.
Yeah.
These adverse childhood effects that we're talking about, they also can happen birth to 3.
Absolutely. If you have a parent who has substance abuse problems, if there's child abuse, if there's violence in the family, these kinds of things are create toxic stress, create trauma in a child, and those can have adverse effects later on in life. So that's exactly right.
Devil's advocate, someone says, that's not my kid. I treat my kid, I treat our children fine, and so I feel terrible for these other children, but it's not, quote unquote, my business. It is, isn't it?
I think it's everybody's business.
That's right.
Let's just look at it from an economic standpoint, right? A lot of those kids end up in the emergency room, and we're paying for all of that health care that happens later in life. So we feel like there's lots of reasons and a moral imperative, frankly, to help take care of these kids. So I actually have had a couple of ACEs in my life, but I've been lucky enough to be able to have people who are supportive of me. I've had therapists, I've had family, I've had the supports around me to heal from those things, and actually it's given me certain kinds of strength, and we feel that if we can offer those to the people that don't have those advantages, we think we can make a real difference.
It's so interesting because the research we've read so far is that, the numbers, is it 1 in 4? 1 in 4 children?
Yeah, 1 in 4 children, exactly.
So I'm thinking about this. You were so candid in what you just shared, and as I looked at the list, I thought, I recognize. But I've had help, I've had support, and I appreciate what you said about yourself, but I think to myself, a significant percentage, a significant number, and we're talking about numbers, talking about real kids, do not have that.
That's exactly right.
And what happens?
Well, those adverse experiences lead to health problems later on in life, cancer rates and higher rates of heart disease. Heart disease is actually the #1 thing that comes from
Heart
those
disease.
ACEs. Isn't that
From
that
toxic
surprising?
stress.
Yes, because your cortisol levels, and I didn't know this word until we started doing the work. So when you get into a stressful situation, you have a hormone called cortisone.
Is that the flight or fight thing?
Fight or flight response. And so that lifts up. But if you've had a number of these sort of traumatic events, you live your life in that heightened state instead of regulating and getting calm and coming down. You need that to some degree.
Sure.
But you don't want to live up there, because that kind of stress, as you can imagine, leads to high blood pressure, leads to asthma, leads to
Not
heart
to mention
disease.
the mental health issues as well.
That's part of it as well. But we're really focusing on the health aspect. You need mental health professionals to help those kids get the healing that they need. But what we think is so powerful about this issue is that there are these health outcomes that we think we can make a real impact on.
But what makes you optimistic that we're going to make a real difference?
I'm optimistic because the data tells me so. So Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, she'll speak to this a little bit, but the work that she's done has really shown that the outcomes can be very, very positive if we address the adverse childhood experiences, both from an economic standpoint and a health standpoint. So that's what makes me optimistic. We think, again, if you get them early, you can solve for all of these things later in life, and that's a good thing, I think.
And finally, for the Burke Foundation to be doing this, what's that like?
I'm thrilled. So how grateful can I be that I get to write checks because my father happened to work at Johnson & Johnson and make money, and I'm lucky enough to run this foundation and do good things. It's a dream job. It's fantastic.
By the way, the other part of your life, other than being the CEO here, is you know a little bit about the business that we're in right now. You're an award-winning
certainly do.
film producer, filmmaker. Real quick, was that, you got into that immediately, or?
When I got out of college, I really didn't know what I wanted to do, although I loved acting. So I started acting, and then I moved to Los Angeles with stars in my eyes, and eventually got into producing and directing, and now I make films. I'm working in the foundation, but I still make films. I sort of have a small niche of lower budget movies with name actors. So I do Sundance and Toronto and Cannes Film Festival kind of movies.
I want to thank you for taking the time to speak to us. This event, this night, the people who are gathering, all doing something important to make a difference for too many children who are suffering unnecessarily. Thank you, James.
You're great. Thanks,
Appreciate
Steve.
The preceding program has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 30 years of broadcast excellence. Funding for this edition of Caucus New Jersey has been provided by the Turrell Fund, supporting Right from the Start NJ, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, Delta Dental of New Jersey, NJIT, New Jersey Sharing Network, Wells Fargo, and by Englewood Health. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area.